Officer Noah Carter was just walking his retired K-9 partner, Bruno, past a crumbling pet clinic in Willow Ridge when Bruno stopped cold. He growled, not at danger but at something forgotten. Tucked in the shadows outside the store was a rusted cage holding 3 battered puppies, and a cardboard sign that read, "3 for $1. Must go today." Noah didn't know their story, but Bruno did. One pup was bleeding. One couldn't stand. And the third locked eyes with Bruno like it had seen him before, somehow, somewhere. What kind of cruelty leaves life behind for $1? And what secret was hiding behind their pain? What happens next will restore your faith in second chances, loyal hearts, and the quiet miracles God sends in the form of paws and scars. Drop your city in the comments before we begin. I'd love to see where you're watching from. Maple Ridge, Colorado. Late afternoon, dry heat, golden light, soft wind. The sun hung low over Maple Ridge like a tired lantern, its light stretched thin across the cracked sidewalks and dusty storefronts. A warm gust of air stirred up paper wrappers and old leaves, brushing past the front of Pine and Paw's Veterinary Supply, where the metal signage squeaked faintly in the breeze. Officer Nate Walker, 36, was finishing his patrol route for the day. A steady, square-shouldered man with short, dark brown hair streaked with gray, Nate had the quiet gravity of someone who'd seen more than he spoke of. His storm-gray eyes scanned habitually, his clean-shaven jaw set with the kind of calm earned by years of making hard decisions. He wore the Navy patrol uniform of Maple Ridge Sheriff's Department badge dulled at the edges, utility belt slightly worn, but boots shined to habit. In the back of the cruiser sat Rex, his K-9 partner and oldest friend. Rex was a 10-year-old German shepherd, his sable coat streaked with silver, left ear permanently bent from an old explosion, and a scar like a whip mark down his hind leg. Once the department's top tracking dog, Rex had retired after an ambush 3 years ago left him injured. But Nate kept him close. Not out of obligation, but trust. Rex had saved his life more than once. As they passed the vet supply shop, Rex stood up in the back seat rigid, ears forward, tail frozen mid-arc. A low whine escaped his throat, the kind he used before a storm hit or before a door got kicked in. Nate slowed the cruiser. "What is it, bud?" he asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Rex barked once. Sharp, urgent. Nate pulled over. Through the dusty glass of the storefront, he saw it. Just inside, beneath a buzzing ceiling light, hung a rack usually used for displaying harnesses or pet beds. But this time, dangling off thick butcher-style hooks, were 3 tiny German shepherd puppies, suspended by harnesses like raw meat. Their heads drooped, limbs limp, too weak to bark. Above them, a cardboard sign hung askew, $1 for all. Nate's jaw clenched. Rex barked again, pawing the rear door. Inside the shop, the air smelled of antiseptic and something foul beneath it, rot masked by lemon scent. Nate's boots tapped heavy on the worn linoleum as he entered. Rex pressed close behind him, nose twitching. Behind the counter stood Mr. Lowell, a wiry man in his late 50s with a sunken jaw, tobacco-stained fingers, and a comb-over as thin as the ethics in his eyes. He chewed a wooden toothpick, leaning lazily against the register. "Afternoon, officer," he muttered. "Something I can help you with?" Nate didn't answer. He was already kneeling beside the rack. Rex nosed each puppy gently, sniffing deep, then licked each of their faces as if to check they were alive. They barely responded save for the smallest one, whose paw twitched and tail flicked once. One by one, Nate cradled them off the hooks. "What the hell is this?" His voice was low, flat, a dangerous calm. Lowell shrugged. "Some fella dropped 'em off a couple of days ago. Said they're no good. Been feeding 'em, but space is tight. Figured I'd sell 'em cheap if anyone wanted 'em. No takers. Did he give you a name?" "Nope. Said they were filthy mutts, not worth the gas to come back for." Rex growled, deep, menacing. His body moved subtly between Nate and Lowell. Nate stared the man down, then reached into his wallet. He pulled out a $1 bill and slapped it on the counter. "Unhook that sign." "They're mine now." Lowell raised his hands mockingly. "Hey, you got a receipt. Do I look like I'm in the mood for jokes?" The puppies were bundled inside Nate's jacket, 3 fragile bodies pressed to his chest. One brighter-eyed, a glint of defiance already showing, nibbled his thumb. She'd later be called Ember. The big, round-bellied male, who refused to blink, would be named Bruno. And the smallest, trembling like a leaf, who buried her nose into Nate's collar, would be Piper. As Nate turned to leave, he glanced back once. "If I find out those dogs were harmed under your roof, I'll have a warrant so fast this place won't know what hit it." Lowell scoffed but said nothing. Outside, the wind had stilled. Rex trotted beside Nate, his head high but his gaze never left the shop door. At the cruiser, Nate opened the back, letting Rex jump in first. Then he carefully laid the pups on an old fleece blanket he always kept folded for Rex. The 3 huddled together, finding warmth in one another. Rex nosed them gently, then settled beside them like a sentinel. Back behind the wheel, Nate let out a slow breath. He didn't know yet where this road was leading, only that it had started here with a bark, a rack of hooks, and $1. The air in Maple Ridge had cooled by morning, though the heat still clung to the sidewalk like yesterday's dust. The cruiser rolled to a stop outside Jensen Veterinary and Rescue, a modest brick building tucked behind the hardware store. Sunlight slid off its windows, and a wooden wind chime tinkled above the door. Officer Nate Walker stepped out, careful not to jostle the bundle in his arms. 3 puppies, Ember, Bruno, and Piper, huddled in a repurposed canvas duffel lined with flannel. Rex followed close behind, his movements precise but slightly stiff from age, eyes constantly scanning. Inside the clinic, the smell was a blend of antiseptic, dog shampoo, and morning coffee. A slim woman in her mid-40s stood behind the reception counter, her dark blonde hair tucked into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. Dr. Marla Jensen had the calm hands of someone used to holding frightened animals and the sharp tongue of someone who had little patience for cruelty. She was tall, with faint crow's feet at the corners of her hazel eyes, and a back that had once been injured rescuing a Great Dane from a frozen ditch. It made her lean slightly to the left when she stood still, though she never mentioned it. When she saw Nate, she pushed open the half door. "What did you drag in this time, Walker?" 3 puppies," he said. "Found 'em hanging in a rack at Pine and Paws. $1 for all. Look like German shepherds. I need a full exam." Marla took one look at the trembling shapes and whistled low. "God. Get 'em on the table." As Nate carefully set the pups down, Rex stationed himself near the cabinet, eyes fixed on the door, tail still. Piper whimpered softly at the metal table's cold touch. Ember growled a warning more than a threat. Bruno just lay flat, his breathing shallow. Marla pulled on latex gloves. "Let's start with the big one." She examined Bruno, first checking teeth, paws, belly, ears. Then she frowned, palpating his side. "See that?" She pointed. "Injection site." "Clean, recent. What kind of injection?" She moved to a drawer and pulled out a tiny UV light. Under the beam, a faint greenish glow bloomed near his spine. "I've seen this before. Usually in farm puppies, cheap breeders trying to bulk them fast. Hormones, sometimes steroids. Illegal?" Nate asked. "In doses like this?" "Absolutely. Especially if they're unmarked," she continued with Ember. Another glow. Then Piper, who tried to scramble off the table. Nate reached out instinctively, steadying her. The pup was shaking, eyes wide, body curled as if expecting a blow. It took Rex stepping closer and licking her ear for her to settle. Even then, she kept looking toward the door. "She's trauma-wired," Marla said quietly. "That's not fear." "That's learned fear." Nate didn't reply. Marla moved to clean a small cut near Piper's shoulder. "They've all got injection marks. Multiple sites. That's not typical for meds. Whoever had them wasn't just trying to treat illness. They were modifying appearance." "For resale?" Nate asked. Marla nodded grimly. "Sheenier coat, faster growth, better muscle tone. The black market breeders do it all the time to fetch higher prices. The side effects are usually deadly, especially for shepherds. They don't handle synthetic hormones well. Livers can't take it, Piper whimpered again when a scalpel tray clinked nearby. Loud sounds trigger her, Marla said, glancing at Nate. That's conditioning. Maybe punishment. Rex suddenly stiffened. His nose pointed toward the baseboard heater under the counter. He let out a sharp huff, then began sniffing insistently. Nate knelt beside him. You got something, boy? Rex scratched once at the edge of the wall paneling, then barked, short and deliberate. Marla looked puzzled. That heater's broken. We haven't used it since March. Nate reached under the heater and felt something plastic, wedged in the corner. He pulled out a small resealable bag, cloudy from dust. Inside, 2 capped syringes and a torn piece of paper with smudged numbers written in marker. AXT-448K9. Marla leaned over. That's not ours. You sure? Positive. That code AXT, that's a compound name. We used to carry it 5 years ago, but it got pulled from shelves. Too many side effects. Someone's using your clinic as a drop site. Marla's expression hardened. Not on my watch. Nate sealed the bag and made a note to send it to the lab. Piper crawled to the edge of the table and pressed her nose into Rex's fur. The old dog didn't move. Just sat still, letting her find what warmth she could. Marla sighed. They're not strays, Nate. They're remnants. Leftovers from someone trying to cut profit margins too tight. I've seen a few cases like this, different breeds, same results. Usually they don't make it this long. Have you reported it? She nodded. Filed 2 reports. No follow-up. I'll file one that doesn't get buried, Nate said. He turned to Rex. You did good, old boy. Rex wagged his tail once. That was enough. Back in the cruiser, Nate secured the evidence bag, then glanced back at the 3 pups. Ember was sitting upright now, ears alert. Bruno, belly up, was snoring. Piper rested her head on Rex's side, her breathing finally even. Marla stepped out of the clinic and leaned into the window. Keep them warm. Feed light. I'll send you the blood work once it's done. Thanks, Doc. As Nate pulled away, he didn't turn the cruiser toward home. He had a new route now, one that didn't follow department protocol but followed the signs. And all signs pointed to something bigger than 3 broken pups and a bag of needles. He just didn't know how big yet. The afternoon sun stretched low and warm across the streets of Maple Ridge, casting long shadows from the lamp posts onto the sidewalk like ink spilled across parchment. Inside the precinct's modest tech room, Officer Nate Walker leaned over a grainy security monitor, paused mid-frame. The footage showed the exterior of Pine and Paws, dated 3 days ago, time-stamped at 6:41 p.m. The resolution wasn't great, but it was good enough. The man in the footage stood just off-center, half-turned from the camera. He wore a long black leather duster that flared with the wind, and a faded fedora angled low over his face. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed for someone about to discard 3 lives. Slung in his right hand was a metal suitcase, the kind used more for transporting tools or medical gear than anything a regular person would carry to a vet. Nate hit play. The man looked around once too casually, then shoved open the clinic's side door. A moment later, he emerged without the case. Behind him, 3 dark shapes squirmed weakly in a box placed beside the rack Ember, Bruno, and Piper, before they'd been strung up like forgotten merchandise. The man didn't linger. He walked back to a dusty silver pickup, tossed his coat behind him, and drove off. "Freeze it," Nate said aloud, even though no one else was there. He tapped the screen when the truck's rear license plate came into focus, partially obstructed by grime but legible enough with enhancement software. Back in his office, Nate input the numbers into the department's vehicle trace system. Within seconds, the screen flashed with results. Registered to Lyle Darnell, age 58, last known address, Millersfield, New Mexico. The name hit Nate like a gust of cold wind. Lyle Darnell had surfaced before, during a joint investigation out of El Paso 4 years earlier. Back then, he'd been suspected of running a black market kennel, supplying trained dogs to buyers across state lines. The operation was slick dogs pumped full of enhancers, taught aggressive commands, then sold to private security firms or, more troublingly, criminal organizations looking for canine muscle. The charges never stuck. By the time the feds raided the compound, Darnell was long gone, and the evidence had conveniently disappeared. Nate opened the file and skimmed the notes. No prior arrests. Multiple aliases. Known to use disposable phones. Traveled frequently between Arizona and Colorado. Always a step ahead. Rex let out a low growl from the corner of the room. "You remember him, don't you?" Nate said quietly. Rex got to his feet, walked to the screen, and sniffed the frozen image of the metal case Darnell had carried. Then he sat down, tail twitching once. The same sharp reaction he'd had in the vet clinic near the heater. "That's the scent," Nate muttered. "It's the same damn chemical." Rex barked once, short and clear. The confirmation settled Nate's doubts into something solid. Darnell hadn't just dumped those puppies. He was part of a chain, and this time he'd left behind more than bruised fur and broken trust. That evening, Nate brought the 3 pups into his backyard, a modest stretch of fenced grass behind his 2-bedroom ranch home, where Rex had spent his retirement mornings sunbathing. The puppies, stronger now, toddled across the yard with clumsy curiosity. Bruno chewed a shoe. Ember chased a falling leaf like it owed her money. Piper stayed closest to the porch steps, flinching when a nearby truck backfired. Nate had been experimenting with simple commands to see what the pups retained. That evening, while Ember was chewing on a rope toy, Nate gave a short, sharp whistle. To his surprise, Ember immediately sat, tail twitching, eyes locked onto him like a cadet awaiting further orders. "Rex, did you see that?" Rex, lying in the grass, opened one eye. Nate tried another whistle pattern, followed by a low flashlight flick. Piper, previously trembling, froze. Her ears dropped and she cowered, not in fear, but in expectation, like she was bracing for a blow or waiting for the next command. "They were trained," Nate murmured. "Not just handled." Trained for something, Bruno, on the other hand, rolled over onto his back and pawed at the air, clearly uninterested in commands or theories. Nate chuckled once, but the weight settled fast again. Trained pups, chemical injections, and a man with a history of disappearing just in time. This wasn't random. This wasn't over. He pulled out his phone and called a contact in Denver Deputy Sarah Kendrick, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, and known for her pattern-tracking work. They'd met during a conference in Boulder last year and kept in occasional touch. Sarah had a lean frame. Thick, dark hair usually tied in a braided bun, and a nose for corruption that had nearly gotten her kicked off the force twice. When she picked up, Nate explained what he had so far. The footage, the injections, the puppy's behavior. The scent match Rex had confirmed. "You think Darnell's starting up again?" she asked. "I think he never stopped. I'll check animal permit databases. If he's moving dogs in volume, someone's processing papers somewhere. Give me 24 hours. I owe you. No, you owe me lunch." Get in line. As the sun dipped, Nate sat on the porch steps beside Rex, watching the 3 pups settle in a sleepy pile against the grass. Ember stood last, eyes locked on the field beyond the fence, like she was waiting for something or someone. "You were made to follow," Nate said softly, "but now you get to lead." Rex huffed and nudged Ember's flank. She laid down. From inside the house, the scent of warmed-up chili floated out through the open screen. Nate didn't know where Darnell was yet. But he knew exactly what he looked like, what he carried, and what he'd left behind. This time, he wouldn't get away clean. The road to the outskirts of Maple Ridge narrowed into a gravel trail barely wider than Nate's cruiser. The trees leaned in close, branches scraping the roof like whispering fingers. Twilight had settled in, painting the sky a murky violet, and every dip in the path felt like a quiet warning. Officer Nate Walker tightened his grip on the wheel as the headlights picked out the rotted sign half buried in weeds. Bluff Creek Kennels, closed until further notice. The boards beneath it were warped and gray, splintered by time and weather. From the dash, Rex let out a low, wary growl. "This is the place," Nate said quietly. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." Rex was already shifting his weight, nose pressed to the passenger window. His ears twitched at the silence. No barking, no rustling. Just the heavy hush of a place long abandoned or carefully staged to appear so. They parked behind a thicket of wild juniper, cutting the engine. Nate stepped out and scanned the horizon. The building ahead was a wide, single-level ranch structure with a collapsing tin roof and broken windows. But the fencing was still intact, too intact for a place supposedly shut down years ago. Nate clicked his flashlight on but kept it low. Rex stayed close, nose to the dirt, muscles coiled. The two moved silently around the perimeter. There was no movement inside the building. No scent of food, waste, or even decay. Just earth, dry, clean. They reached the side of the structure where an old shed leaned at a crooked angle. Its door creaked open slightly. Rex paused, nose flaring, then let out a soft bark twice, the signal they'd used for potential danger. Inside the shed, the dust was thick, but the floor was scraped clean in one wide path. At the far end was a hatch set into the ground. A padlock hung from the latch, but it wasn't locked. Nate crouched, heart pounding, and lifted the hatch slowly. Cold air rushed upward. Stale, coppery. Beneath, a short stairwell descended into darkness. "Stay behind me," Nate whispered and started down. The stairs creaked under his boots, and the air turned damp. He reached the bottom and clicked his flashlight higher. A concrete corridor stretched ahead, barely wide enough for two people to walk shoulder to shoulder. Rex descended silently, staying close. The hallway led to a small open space, a holding room. Rows of metal kennels lined both sides, but none were occupied. No barking, no whimpering. Just silence, but the floor told a different story. Straw scattered in clumps stained a deep rust brown. Scratches on the kennel bars. Nail marks in the concrete. A broken water bowl kicked into the corner. And in one cage something worse. A trail of coarse black fur, matted and stuck to the fencing. Blood smeared in uneven streaks near the drain. Rex growled again, low and uneasy. Then he pulled sharply toward the far end of the room, where a mound of hay had been carelessly dumped in the corner. Nate followed, flashlight sweeping wide. Rex began to dig. The straw gave way to a torn plastic tarp, and beneath it, a heavy-duty burlap sack, stiff with age. Rex clawed once, then stepped back. Nate knelt and pulled the sack open. The air turned sour. Inside were bones dozens. Small skulls, femurs. Jawbones with teeth still attached. Dog bones, at least 6 or 7 different sizes. Nate swallowed hard, forcing bile back. And nestled near the bottom, a small plastic capsule used for microchips. He bagged the bones and chip, snapping photos of the kennel walls, the blood trails, the marks. Rex stood sentinel, his posture locked and tense, eyes fixed on the entrance as if expecting something or someone to return. "I don't think this place was abandoned," Nate muttered. "I think it was emptied in a hurry." Back at the station later that night, the puppies stayed in the back office, now converted into a temporary playpen. Ember had torn through the corner of her kennel pad. Piper refused to sit under the light. She kept hiding behind the desk every time someone passed by the hallway. Bruno simply slept, belly up, as if unaware of the tension mounting around them. Nate called Doctor, Marla Jensen, just past 9:30 p.m. She picked up on the second ring. "Sorry to bother you this late," he said, "but I've got something you need to look at." By 10, she was in the office, dressed in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a rushed ponytail. She took the microchip capsule from Nate, handling it with gloved fingers, then scanned it through her portable reader. "Registration code found," she said. "Give me a second." She typed on her tablet, then froze. Nate leaned in. "What is it?" "This chip belongs to a dog named Jax. Registered K9 unit. 3 years ago, Colorado State Patrol. "Wait," Nate said, breath catching. "That dog went missing in the raid. Same one that forced Rex into early retirement." Marla looked up, eyes narrowing. "So one of these puppies is Jax's offspring." Nate turned to look at the pen. Ember sat nearest to the bars, her stare steady and far too aware for a pup her age. "They didn't just breed any dogs," he said. "They bred K9s. "For sale," Marla nodded slowly. "And if they had Jax, they probably had others." Nate sat down hard on the edge of the desk. Rex came to rest beside him, placing one paw across his boot. It all clicked into place. Stolen K9s, forced breeding, hormone enhancement, black market training, and dogs either sold or discarded if they didn't perform. "This was a farm," Nate whispered, "a ghost kennel." And it wasn't quiet because it was empty. It was quiet because something terrible had already happened. The wind swept low across the chain-link fences of an abandoned construction site on the edge of Pine Bluff, a forgotten stretch of concrete where weeds broke through cracks like survivors. Floodlights flickered at the corners, too bright for the time of night, revealing just enough to make it feel legitimate and just little enough to keep the police guessing. Officer Nate Walker parked the rust-bitten van alongside a row of unmarked vehicles. His badge was tucked away in his boot. On the seat beside him, Rex shifted, disguised with a frayed rope leash, his normally brushed coat dusted with dirt. The bent ear, the scarred leg, those stayed the same. Nate exhaled and stepped out, leading Rex like a man with a mutt to sell or trade. He wore an oil-stained jacket, faded jeans, and a trucker cap low over his eyes. He looked the part. He needed to. From behind a nearby sedan, a woman stepped forward. Chloe Navarro, 34, was a special agent with the FBI's Organized Animal Trafficking Task Force. Slender, Latina, with sharp features and sharper instincts, Chloe had the gait of someone who trusted her sidearm more than small talk. Her dark hair was tied up under a gray hoodie, and a radio buzzed quietly in her ear. "You're late," she said, checking over Rex with a practiced glance. "I took the scenic route." Chloe handed him a laminated number card. "You're bidder 12. Say as little as possible. Act like you're desperate for a mean dog but short on cash. Most of these sellers love that. Any confirmation it's the Darnell ring? Nothing solid, but the layout fits his style. Underground exchange. Word of mouth, no phones. Only cash." Nate nodded. Rex growled low one sharp throaty pulse. They entered through a side gate where a man with a clipboard grunted, looked Nate over, then waved him inside. The warehouse was little more than a hollowed-out shell of what once had been a supply depot concrete floor, rusted beams, tarps strung between support pillars. The smell of ammonia and sawdust clung to the air. To the left, makeshift kennels had been assembled from fencing panels and plywood. Dogs, mostly German shepherds and Malinois, sat motionless, too still, too quiet. They weren't barking. They were waiting. Rex stiffened beside Nate, his body posture shifting. His tail dropped. His muscles tensed. On a raised platform at the back, a man in a leather trench coat and sunglasses adjusted a microphone. He tapped it twice. "Auction starts in 10. All dogs have basic obedience and first-tier aggression response. Test before bidding. No refunds. No returns." Chloe faded into the crowd near the rear, speaking softly into her radio. Nate made his way down the aisle between kennels, pretending to evaluate the dogs. He paused in front of a black shepherd with yellow eyes and a scar over its left flank. Its nose twitched. It didn't bark. Didn't move, and then Rex stopped. Nate felt it before he saw it, Rex's low growl. The kind that rumbled like a held breath. Rex's eyes were locked across the room, toward a figure standing half-shadowed beneath a tarp. The man wore the same long leather coat from the raid photos. His build was wiry. His nose crooked from an old break. A pale tattoo curled up his neck from his collar. Rex growled again. Not in warning. In recognition. Nate's stomach tightened. This was the man from the hidden kennels, the one the pups feared. The one Rex remembered. Rex took one step forward. Nate stopped him with a tap to the flank. Not yet. A whistle blew. First, Lot K9B 3 female shepherd, 8 months, first response trained, narcotic neutralized, silent command responsive. A handler dragged a trembling pup onto the stage. Nate's heart twisted. It was Piper's size. He looked to the holding cages and saw her. Not Piper, but nearly identical. The same wide eyes, same hesitant step. She responded to the handler's voice, flinched at the word. Casa. The same Spanish command Nate had heard Piper react to earlier in the week, her ears pinned, tail dropped, frozen in place. It hadn't been trauma. It had been training. Nate stepped back and whispered into his sleeve, Confirmed. These dogs are trained for cartel use. The command matches what our pup responded to. Chloe's voice came through. We have visual on at least 20 dogs. Half are tagged, others look custom-bred. Handler is matching Darnell's description from El Paso, but we need a trigger. As the auction continued, Nate moved closer to the leather-coated man. Rex remained glued to the scent, low growls rumbling through his chest. The man noticed. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning Rex's face. Then he froze. He knew Rex, and Rex knew him. In that instant, the man lunged toward the side exit. Nate dropped the leash. Go! Rex shot forward like a bullet. The crowd scattered. Chloe shouted into her comms, We're green, take it down! Rex cut through the clutter, dodging cages and chairs. The man reached the door, but Rex was faster. He launched, tackling the figure at the knees. The two tumbled hard against the doorframe. By the time Nate caught up, the man was pinned, Rex's teeth near his throat growling softly. Chloe arrived with 2 agents and cuffs. We've got our buyer. Name's Colt Raider. Been wanted in 3 states. He's connected to Darnell. One of his top trainers, Colt, spat blood. You think this changes anything? Nate said nothing. Rex didn't blink. As Colt was dragged away, the dogs in the cages finally began to bark, not in fear, but in noise. Like something had broken. Like silence had lost. The rain came harder that night, as if the sky itself mourned the things that had been done in silence behind rusted doors. Officer Noah Reeves stood by the open cruiser door, his eyes fixed on the glowing red dot on the GPS tablet in his hand. The signal, the one Chloe and Nate had secretly planted under the trailer at the auction, had stopped moving 2 hours ago, just outside the industrial edge of Harper's Bluff. Next to him, Rex sat poised, ears forward, nose twitching. The old German shepherd had been tense since they lost sight of Ember, the young female shepherd who had slipped from the shelter earlier that afternoon. She had tracked the scent of one of the auction men, a cruel handler with a cigarette-burn scar across his wrist. Chloe recognized him, and Ember never forgot. Noah's grip tightened around the tablet. She's leading us right into it, he said. Deputy Chloe stepped out of her own vehicle behind him. Her auburn hair was soaked, strands clinging to her cheeks. We got authorization. SWAT's on standby. It's go time. But it wasn't just a tactical decision. It was personal. Too many dogs, including Ember and even Rex in his earlier life, had suffered because of people like the ones they were about to confront. The warehouse loomed ahead like a rotting beast. Corrugated metal siding hung loose, and a single flickering light buzzed near the entrance. Noah's team moved in silence, 5 officers in tactical black forming a perimeter. Then came the low growl. Not from Rex, but from somewhere inside. And then, a yelp. Short, sharp, panicked. Rex's body tensed. His hackles rose, and without needing a command, he moved forward. Noah followed, gun raised. They entered through the side door Chloe had found unlatched. Inside, the warehouse was worse than they imagined. Metal crates lined the walls, not for cargo, but for dogs. Crates barely big enough to stand. Inside, the air reeked of fear, urine, and blood. Dogs whimpered and barked behind bars, some too weak to make a sound. Rex moved from crate to crate, nose working frantically. He paused at one, a shepherd mix with a deep gash across his chest. The dog lifted his head weakly, ears twitching. "That's Bruno," Chloe whispered. "He was on the list. We thought he was already shipped overseas." Noah knelt and broke the lock. But Rex had already moved ahead, tail low, silent now. A soldier on a mission. At the back of the warehouse, behind stacked cages and tarps, was a smaller door. Rex pawed at it once, then looked back. Noah nodded. "Let's go." Beyond the door was what looked like a private training room. Mats, chains, metal poles, even a blood-stained vest on a hook. But it wasn't empty. Standing in the center of the room was a man in a gray hoodie, holding a taser in one hand and a choke leash in the other. And cowering near the wall was Ember. Her eyes met Rex's, wild, frightened, but alive. The man turned at the noise. "Get back!" he shouted. "She's mine!" But before he could move, Rex lunged. The years melted off his muscles as he flew, jaws clamping down on the man's wrist with precision honed from training. The taser clattered to the floor. The man screamed, but Rex held just long enough for Noah and Chloe to subdue him. Ember didn't run. She slowly approached Rex, sniffed his shoulder, then collapsed beside him. Exhausted, safe. The rest of the night was chaos. Officers stormed in. SWAT swept the rest of the compound. They found 12 more dogs, most with signs of abuse or neglect. Piper was discovered in a crate near the furnace room, drugged but alive. Nate carried her out himself, tears streaking his muddy cheeks. Chloe cataloged every dog with trembling hands, documenting injuries and logging names. For the first time in years, she felt like she was doing more than just paperwork. She was restoring dignity to creatures that had only known pain. Noah, meanwhile, stood beside Rex as the medical team checked his jaw and paw. "You did good, partner," he whispered. Rex leaned against his leg, eyes already scanning the room for new threats. He was tired, but not broken, never broken. That same night, across town, a young journalist named Emily Crane received an anonymous envelope slid under her door. Inside was a USB drive labeled Sanctuary Records, Internal Use Only. It contained footage of the auction, including the faces of several local officials in attendance. Emily had once been silenced for exposing corruption in the animal shelter system. But this time she had names, faces, and proof. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Sheriff Lehman, it's Crane. I have something you'll want to see." By sunrise, the warehouse was sealed as a crime scene, and the dogs were en route to a veterinary facility in Cedar Valley. Chloe rode in the back with Piper and Bruno, while Ember curled up beside Rex in the K9 cage, finally sleeping. Noah drove in silence, glancing in the rearview mirror at Rex. He thought about how he found him, bruised, chained, silent in that corner of the flea market. And now here he was, protector, hero, leader. Some dogs are born with a heart too big for cages. The morning sun filtered through the broken blinds of the Pinecrest Precinct's K9 unit quarters, casting warm slats of light across the tiled floor. Nate Morgan, still in his sweatpants and an old academy hoodie, sipped black coffee by the window. His bruises from the raid were fading, but the deeper wounds, those left by betrayal, by the auction, by what the dogs had endured, remained. Curled up beside him was Rex, the 10-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat streaked with silver, one ear permanently bent, and a long scar down his hind leg. Once a hardened K9, now the steady heartbeat of this fractured pack. In a corner of the room, the three puppies Piper, Bruno, and Ember each showed signs of cautious hope. Piper, the smallest, was curled beneath an old wool blanket Rex had nudged toward her the night before. Her paws twitched slightly in sleep, but for the first time since being rescued, her body wasn't curled into a trembling ball. Instead, she lay stretched out, breathing softly, unafraid. Bruno, larger than his siblings and eternally eager, had taken to mimicking Rex's every move. That morning, he'd dragged one of Nate's house slippers from the front hallway, proudly placing it at the officer's feet with his tail wagging furiously. Ember, the most vigilant, sat upright near the back door, amber eyes fixed on the outside world. She had already barked once during the night when a raccoon scuttled past the fence. Nate hadn't even heard it, but Rex had a low growl in his throat, then silence. Ember, watching, learning. Chloe Navarro arrived just past 9 a.m., wearing a black turtleneck under her FBI windbreaker, her dark brown hair pinned up in a loose bun. She handed Nate a file folder, but he waved it off. "You could have emailed," he said, smiling faintly. "I could have," she replied, setting the folder down anyway. "But I wanted to see how the pack was settling." She crouched to Bruno's level, letting him sniff her hand before she scratched his ears. "They're different," she said. Nate nodded. "Yeah. And they're staying?" Chloe blinked, surprised. "You sure? That's a lot for one man to handle." He looked at Rex, who was now grooming Ember's ears with slow, methodical licks. "They deserve peace. And Rex, he's teaching them. It's like he's not just healing. He's becoming something more." Chloe stood. "You know, I pulled Rex's old file," she said quietly. "Most of it's redacted. But what wasn't? He served in Operation Iron Wake. Urban collapse scenario. Multiple rescues. He pulled 3 children from a collapsed school building under sniper fire. Nate's brow furrowed. They said he was just a patrol dog. They lied. Someone wanted his record buried. Maybe because he saw too much. Maybe because they wanted to discard him when he became inconvenient." Rex, as if sensing their conversation, turned his head toward them. His gaze wasn't bitter. It was calm, almost fatherly. "Whatever they tried to erase," Nate said, "he's rebuilding here." Outside, the precinct's backyard had been converted into a makeshift training yard. A few old tires, cones, and crates lay scattered across the grass. Nate led the 3 pups outside, tossing a tennis ball toward the center. Bruno raced after it, bounding over a crate with reckless joy. Piper hesitated, looking to Rex. The older dog gave a single bark, low and encouraging. Piper bolted forward, her tail rising slightly for the first time. Ember didn't chase the ball. She paced the perimeter, nose to the ground, investigating. Always the sentinel. Later that afternoon, Chief Harland A. Broadman with a barrel chest and a fading crew cut dropped by Nate's office. He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You've got eyes on you, Morgan," he said. "State Department likes what you did." "They're talking about promotion unit," Commander Nate didn't hesitate. "Thanks. But I'm staying right where I am." Harland raised a brow. "That's not exactly career smart." "I'm not chasing stripes," Nate said. "I'm building something better." As Harland left, Chloe leaned into the doorway, a knowing smile on her lips. "Father of 3, huh?" Nate chuckled. "Guess I've got responsibilities now." That night, the 4 dogs lay together in the den. Rex stretched across the center and the pups curled close. Nate dimmed the lights and sat nearby, filling out a few final reports. On the table beside him lay a small tag with freshly engraved names: Piper, Bruno, Ember, Home. He picked up the tag and held it in his palm, then looked at Rex. "You're not alone anymore, old boy." Rex blinked slowly, then rested his head atop Piper's back. And for the first time in a long time, there were no nightmares, only peace. The first golden rays of spring broke through the misty dawn, painting Maple Ridge in hues of hope. Nate stood in the backyard of his modest cottage, surveying the wooden structure he had built with his own hands. It wasn't large, nor did it have locks or surveillance cameras. Just a simple wooden sign hung above the open gate. "Here, you are not for sale." The words, burned into the grain with care, were more than a message, they were a vow. Rex lay nearby on the porch, his head resting on crossed paws, his scarred leg stretched comfortably to the side. The 10-year-old German shepherd, with a sable coat streaked in silver and one bent ear, had seen more than most humans ever would. Now, his days of fear and battle were behind him, replaced by evenings filled with quiet skies and the sound of young paws stumbling in the grass. The 3 puppies, Piper, Bruno, and Ember, had grown quickly in the weeks since their rescue. Piper remained the most curious, often nosing through Nate's garden and trying to decipher human tools. Bruno, heavier built and slower, liked to nap beside Rex, occasionally mimicking his mentor's stoic watch. Ember, sleek and alert, had developed an uncanny ability to detect people even before the doorbell rang. Their wounds had healed, but the emotional scars would take longer. Yet here, in this home without locks, they were learning that love didn't come with a price tag. It was a Saturday when Sheriff Alden, a burly man in his early 50s with graying temples and a gruff voice, arrived unannounced. Despite his usual rigid demeanor, today he wore a dark blue dress uniform, polished boots, and held a velvet-covered box in his hand. "Hope you don't mind, officer," he said, tipping his hat to Nate, "but the town council has something to say." Behind him trailed a group of neighbors, townspeople, and fellow officers. Among them was young Jimmy Carr, no older than 10, with shaggy brown hair and nervous eyes. He held something tightly in his fist. Nate opened the gate fully, motioning them in. Rex, sensing the shift in energy, stood slowly and limped to Nate's side. "Rex," the sheriff began, clearing his throat, "what you did, what you continue to do for this town, for our people, it deserves more than a plaque. It deserves our trust." With that, he opened the velvet box to reveal a brass medallion engraved with the words, "Guardian of Maple Ridge." The symbol of the town's crest shimmered underneath. Sheriff Alden bent down and clasped the medal gently to Rex's collar. But it was Jimmy who stepped forward with trembling hands, reaching into his pocket to pull out a simple leather collar. The boy had once been pulled from a freezing drainage ditch by Rex's jaws, after running from a drunken stepfather. He didn't speak, he just reached out and fastened the collar over the old one. Carved in neat, uneven letters were the words, "Guardian." Rex didn't bark. He didn't move. He simply leaned into the boy's touch and closed his eyes. Later that afternoon, Piper, Bruno, and Ember chased each other under the birch trees while Nate spoke with Chloe Navarro, the FBI agent who had helped dismantle the underground dog auction ring. Chloe, dressed in a tan blazer over jeans, leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed, watching the pups play. "They're ready," she said. "The academy's accepted them into the K-9 candidate program." All three, Nate exhaled slowly. They deserve that. They deserve a life with purpose. "So do you, Nate," she added quietly. He didn't respond. But in the pause, Rex patted over, nudging Nate's hand as if to agree. That night the town held a candlelight gathering in the small square. Families came, candles were lit, and stories were shared, not just of crimes stopped or lives saved, but of quiet moments. Of Rex sitting beside the town's veterans on Memorial Day. Of the way he never barked at children, even when they tugged his ears. Of how, after everything, he never lost faith in people. When they returned home, Nate unlatched the gate knot that it was ever really locked and let the pups tumble inside. The moon was high, stars scattered like whispers across the sky. Rex, as he always did, took his place on the porch under the eaves, his body curled but alert. He watched the yard until his breathing slowed, then finally closed his eyes, the word "Guardian" catching the moonlight on his collar. There was no lock on the gate. And there never would be, because freedom, once tasted, could never be taken again, and because sometimes the truest home is not made of walls or wood, but of promises kept. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with lightning or trumpets. They come quietly, in the shape of a battered German shepherd who refuses to give up, in the eyes of a child who dares to trust again, or in the quiet resolve of a man who builds a home with no locks, only love. "Here, you are not for sale." That sign wasn't just for the dogs, it was a promise to every broken soul that walked through pain and still chose kindness. Rex was not just a dog. He was a guardian sent not by accident but by divine timing, a reminder that even when the world abandons you, God hasn't. His miracles often wear fur, arrive limping, and sit beside you without asking for anything but your presence. And perhaps, in our own lives, we are called to be someone's Rex, to protect, to believe, and to make space for healing without condition. If this story moved you, Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that hope is real, that second chances exist, and that God still sends guardians when we least expect it. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced a quiet miracle in your life. Write Amen if you believe that God still works through love, loyalty, and second chances. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep sharing stories that restore faith in humanity. May God bless every heart that reads this and every soul that needs a home with no lock.
Who abandons a German Shepherd puppy in a locked crate, waiting for the ocean to finish what they started. That's what I saw that afternoon on Miami's South Beach. The sun was burning the water into 1,000 shards of light, and there it was, an old gray plastic crate bobbing against a barnacle-crusted pier piling. Inside, a black-furred puppy, no more than 3 months old, eyes wide, fur matted with salt. He was pressed so far against the vent slats I could see each tiny whisker trembling. And just feet away, a bright red rescue buoy floated loose, drifting back and forth like a cruel taunt. My name is Mateo Reyes. I'm 41, a volunteer with the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I've seen plenty in these waters, drownings, rescues gone wrong, but nothing hit me like that sight. Not because it was dangerous, but because someone put him there. Someone carried a living, breathing German Shepherd puppy to the edge, closed the latch, and walked away. I swear the tide was laughing at me, sucking in and out, lifting the crate a little higher with every passing minute. The puppy's paws were already wet, tapping desperately against the ridges of plastic. He didn't bark. He just looked at me, eyes dark and wet, like he was asking a question I didn't know how to answer. Tourists were standing on the pier, phones out. Some filmed, some whispered. One guy even chuckled nervously. But no one moved. They kept a distance like it was entertainment, a show they hadn't paid for. My stomach turned. I dropped my pack, grabbed the red buoy line coiled near the pier. My hands shook, not from fear of the water, but from rage. A puppy, trapped in a crate, left as bait for the tide. The sun flashed off the crate's handle, and for a moment I saw something else. A piece of neon green ribbon snagged in the plastic seam. It didn't belong there. It fluttered in the breeze like a signal, almost daring me to notice. My gut told me it was a clue, something left behind by the person who had done this. The tide slapped hard, the crate shifted, and the puppy yelped. The sound tore through me. His name wasn't mine to give, but in that instant I whispered, "Hold on, little one." And then the water surged higher, rocking the crate so violently I thought it would flip. I didn't think anymore. I ran for the edge of the pier. They told me to wait. A dockhand in a faded blue cap stepped in front of me, one hand out like a traffic cop. "Animal control's on their way," he said. His voice was flat, like it was just another lost item drifting out at sea. I stared past him at the crate as another small wave slapped against its side. The German Shepherd puppy jolted, ears flattening, paws clawing at the holes. He was running out of time, and this guy wanted me to stand still. "Look at him," I snapped, pointing. "He's not going to last another 15 minutes. The dockhand shook his head. "Procedure, man. Liability. You know how it works." I did know. I'd been on the other side of that speech before, but I also knew what it felt like to fail because you hesitated. That memory still lived in me. The kid I couldn't reach one summer years back, the lifeguard uniform heavy on my shoulders when they pulled me away. I wasn't about to add a puppy to that list. I pushed past, yanking the red buoy hard enough that the rope burned my palms. I clipped it fast to a cleat, praying it would hold. Behind me, a few tourists gasped like I was breaking some unspoken rule. Maybe I was. But so what? Rules weren't going to keep this puppy's nose above the water. The crate thudded against the piling again, a hollow, sick sound. Inside, the puppy whimpered, a sound that reached straight down into my chest and squeezed. His black fur clung to him in wet spikes, his eyes wide and fixed on me as if I was the only lifeline left in this world. I crouched, stretched my arm out as far as it would go, but the distance was too much. "Come on, buddy," I murmured, low and steady, like he could actually understand. Maybe he did. His tiny body shifted forward, nose poking through one of the slats, searching for me. My fingertips brushed plastic, then slipped. Too far. That's when I heard it, the deep thrum of an engine echoing across the channel. I looked up. A tour boat had swung wide, its wake rolling straight toward the pier. The crate rocked once, twice, and I realized what was about to happen. The next wave would either lift him out or take him under. The wake lifted the crate like a coffin. It slammed upward, water rushing in through the vent holes, sloshing over the German Shepherd puppy's paws. He scrambled, claws scraping the plastic, coughing as brine splashed his muzzle. My heart lurched. I could see the whites of his eyes now, wide and panicked, and I swore I felt that same salt burn in my own chest. I dropped flat onto the pier, stretching so far my ribs pressed against the boards. The buoy line cut into my wrist as I shoved it outward, aiming to wedge it under the crate. A teenager beside me, one of the kids who'd been filming, finally dropped his phone and grabbed the rope. "I've got it," he yelled, knuckles whitening. For the first time, someone was helping. I reached again, fingertips grazing the edge of the crate. The puppy lunged forward, nose pushing through the slat, whining high and desperate. Our eyes locked, and for a split second the noise of the pier, the tourists, the crashing water, everything disappeared. It was just me and him. And I knew I couldn't let go. "Hang on, little guy," I whispered, stretching until my shoulder screamed. My fingernails scraped plastic. I had him. I pulled, heart pounding, trying to tilt the crate toward me. It shifted, water pouring out in a gush. The German Shepherd puppy yelped, scrambling to keep balance. Hope surged in me. I could do this. And then the tour boat's second wave slammed into the piling. The crate jolted sideways, slipping from my grip. My hand clawed empty air, the rope slackening in the boy's fist. I saw the puppy tumble, his tiny body banging against the side as the crate spun. The crowd screamed. My own voice ripped out raw. "No!" The plastic box twisted, caught by the tide, and in an instant it vanished beneath the pier's shadow. I shoved to my knees, scanning the dark water below. The red buoy bobbed once, twice, then disappeared under the crossbeams. And with it, the only sight of him, Barnacle's bite. That was the first thing I felt when I slid down the slick crossbeam under the pier, palms and knees scraping against the rough shell edges. The water beneath me churned, dark and restless, the smell of salt and diesel thick in my throat. I ducked low, eyes straining to adjust to the shadowed maze of pilings, searching for that crate. Then I heard it, a muffled thump, hollow, plastic against wood. I craned my neck, and there it was, jammed sideways between two barnacle-crusted posts, rocking as the tide shoved at it. Inside, the German Shepherd puppy was crouched low, trembling so hard I could see his whole body shiver with each slap of water. "Easy, buddy. Easy." My voice was shaking as much as my hands. I pressed my chest flat against the beam, inching closer, holding the red buoy line tight around my wrist. The crate was wedged hard, suctioned by the incoming tide. I reached out and grabbed the corner, but the slime made it slick as ice. My grip slid right off. That's when I saw it, snagged in the crate's handle, fluttering wetly in the brine. A strip of neon green ribbon, bright, unnatural against the gray plastic and dark water. It looked like a bracelet, the kind people wear at concerts or boat parties. My gut twisted. Whoever left this puppy here didn't just forget him. This was deliberate. The puppy whimpered again, and his dark eyes locked on mine. He pressed his nose to the slats, making the smallest, weakest sound I've ever heard, and I felt something in me break. "Hey, little guy," I whispered, stretching my arm deeper, barnacles cutting at my forearm. "I'm not leaving you, not like they did." I could almost touch him, just another inch. I shoved further, ignoring the sting of salt in my scrapes. My fingertips brushed the wet edge of his fur. Then the tide surged, a wave slammed into the piling, and the whole crate shifted, ripping it from my reach. The buoy line whipped out of my hand. Cold water sprayed my face, and I nearly slipped from the beam. The German Shepherd puppy barked, high, frantic, his first real bark since I'd seen him. And then another sound cut through the dark, the long, low horn of a cruise ship leaving port. Its wake was coming straight for us. I got him, and lost him. The horn's echo was still rolling across the channel when the first surge hit. The crossbeam trembled under me, water rising in a frothing wall that slammed the crate hard against the piling. I lunged, wrapping both hands around its slick corner, yanking with everything I had. For one perfect second, it moved. I tilted it just enough to see his tiny paws scramble, claws clinking on plastic as the German Shepherd puppy tried to climb toward me. "I've got you, Lennox!" The name spilled out of me before I even knew I'd chosen it. A name meant he wasn't just a puppy anymore. He was someone. And he answered it with the smallest whine, eyes wide, ears plastered flat. That sound dug deep, rooting itself in me. I hooked my arm under his chest through the slats, lifting, feeling the desperate thrum of his heartbeat against my wrist. Salt water poured over both of us. For one insane instant, I thought I had him. Then the second surge crashed through. The crate bucked, slammed sideways, and nearly tore my shoulder from its socket. My grip slipped, my elbow smashed the beam, and pain shot down my arm. Lennox yelped, body sliding back into the corner as the crate twisted. "No!" I roared, clutching again, but my fingers caught only water and barnacle slime. He vanished into the dark interior, paws splashing, the crate wedged harder than before. Above me, voices shouted. Someone screamed, "Cruise ship, wake!" like I didn't already know. The red buoy line jerked violently in the teenager's hands up top, but then went slack. I looked and saw it. The knot had slipped loose from the cleat. The buoy, our lifeline, drifted away like a useless toy on the waves. Salt burned my eyes, and fury burned deeper. This wasn't chance. This wasn't bad luck. Someone had locked a German Shepherd puppy in a crate and left him here to drown. And if I failed him now, I was no better than the ones who walked away. Another wave struck, water slamming against my ribs. My grip slipped. My legs dangled for a split second over the churning channel. I clung harder, lungs heaving, staring at that trembling shadow of black fur inside the crate. And I knew. Either I went all in, or he was gone. Then the cruise liner's massive second wake thundered closer, the kind that could tear a dock apart. The piling groaned, and Lennox let out a single sharp bark that echoed like a plea. I gave him a name before I earned it. "Lennox," I whispered again, clinging to the beam as the water boiled beneath us. The German Shepherd puppy froze, head tilted, ears twitching like he'd heard something familiar. His trembling eased for just a heartbeat, and in that sliver of calm, I found my opening. I jammed the red buoy between the crate and the piling, wedging it tight. The plastic groaned as the tide tried to drag it deeper, but the buoy lifted, creating just enough space. My shoulders screamed as I shoved harder, bracing my legs against the slick wood. The crate tilted. Salt water poured out in a rush, and Lennox's paw shot through the slat, clawing for me. That was the moment I promised him out loud. "I won't let you drown. Not today. Not ever." My voice shook, but I meant every word. A hand grabbed my ankle. I whipped my head back, half expecting to see the dockhand trying to haul me up against my will. But it wasn't him. It was the teenager who'd dropped his phone earlier. His face was pale, jaw clenched, but his grip was solid. "I've got your legs!" he shouted over the roar. His dad crouched beside him, pressing his weight down to anchor us both. Strangers, tourists, bystanders, stepping in. For once, they weren't just watching. Lennox whimpered, muzzle pressed tight to the slats, his nose cold against my scraped fingers. He licked at the blood trickling from a barnacle cut up, and for some reason that broke me more than anything else had. Even drowning, abandoned, terrified, he was still giving something, still trying to connect. I pushed again, the crate lifting inch by inch. My muscles shook, sweat mixing with salt water, but the beam shifted, and suddenly the box wasn't wedged so deep. For the first time, I felt hope. Then the water surged again. The tide wasn't waiting for me to figure this out. Each wave lifted higher, each one hungrier, pulling harder at the crate. The buoy squealed against the piling, threatening to pop loose. And above the chaos came a sound I didn't want to hear, the long, rolling breath of the ocean as it changed. The tide was coming in for real now, and once it fully turned, this whole section under the pier would be swallowed. The boy holding my legs screamed, "It's rising!" I looked at Lennox, his tiny chest heaving, fur clinging black and wet. The sea was already reaching for him. We were running out of minutes. Salt leaves scars. When I finally got close enough to wedge my arm through the slats again, I felt the crust on Lennox's fur, dried salt, stiff like shards of glass. This German Shepherd puppy hadn't just fallen in minutes ago. He'd been left here long enough for the ocean to start claiming him. My stomach twisted at the thought. Someone had put him in that crate, sealed the latch, and walked away knowing full well what the tide would do. The neon green ribbon was still there, soaked and limp, fluttering every time the water slapped. I tugged it free and stuffed it in my vest pocket. It wasn't just trash, it was evidence. And I wanted to know who tied it, who thought a life was disposable. Above me, the boy who had grabbed my legs leaned farther over the pier. "Is he okay?" he shouted. His voice cracked, scared but hopeful. I didn't answer right away because Lennox's eyes locked on mine, and the truth hit me. He was hanging on for me alone. His chest heaved, his paws scratched weakly at the crate floor, and still he didn't look away. "Yeah," I finally called back, though my throat burned with the lie. "He's fighting." I braced both hands on the crate, rocking it against the piling. Every shift scraped barnacles louder than nails on glass. Lennox whimpered, water swirling higher, soaking his belly now. My heart hammered harder than the waves. I couldn't let him feel the ocean crawl any higher. Then I heard voices from the pier again, this time sharp and cruel. A man muttered, "Should have just left it. It's just a dog." Another chuckled low, like this was some reality show. I froze, heat burning through me hotter than the Miami sun. "Just a dog? Tell that to the black furred puppy clawing for every breath. Tell that to the heartbeat pulsing against my bleeding arm." "Not on my watch," I growled under my breath. I yanked hard, the crate finally wrenching free with a pop. The momentum nearly sent me headfirst into the channel, but I clung, hauling the crate toward me. Water gushed out in streams, lightening it, and Lennox stumbled against the side, coughing, blinking at daylight like it was the first he'd seen in hours. I could almost reach inside and pull him straight out now, almost. But then the wood groaned above me, loud, splintering. One of the pier's lower beams cracked, shaking with the force of the rising tide. And I realized I wasn't just racing the water anymore. The pier itself was starting to give way. The pier shuddered like it was alive. A deep crack echoed through the beams, and I felt the wood shift beneath my chest. Salt water sprayed up, stinging my eyes. For a heartbeat, I thought the whole structure was about to collapse into the channel, taking me, Lennox, and the crate with it. The tourists above screamed, feet scuffling back from the edge, but Lennox didn't move. The German Shepherd puppy pressed himself against the slats, eyes fixed on me, ears twitching with every groan of the pier. His trust was terrifying, like he'd already decided I was the only thing between him and the ocean. And maybe he was right. I pulled again, arms burning, shoulders screaming from where I'd smashed it earlier. The crate slid closer across the slimy beam, but every inch I gained was a war. Barnacles tore at my palms, blood mixing with salt water until everything burned. Still, I couldn't stop, not when he was so close. A wave slammed, nearly unseating me. My chin smacked the wood, stars flashing in my vision. The crate bucked, Lennox stumbling inside, his paw wedged briefly in the vent before he yanked it free with a whimper. I bit down a curse. Another hit like that, and I'd lose him for good. "Mateo, you'll fall," someone yelled from above, my name echoing off the pilings. I didn't even glance up. Let them think I was reckless. Reckless was better than standing on a pier, watching a puppy drown. I shoved harder, wedging my arm deep through the slats. My fingers brushed his chest, slick and trembling. He leaned into me, nose cold, eyes pleading, and for the first time since this nightmare started, he barked. Just once, sharp and defiant, like he was daring the ocean to try again. That sound lit a fire in me. I hooked my elbow inside the crate and heaved, trying to lift it enough to pry the top loose. The plastic groaned, hinges straining, salt-crusted latch rattling under my grip. I clawed at it, fingernails tearing, until I felt the tiniest shift. Then another wave hit, bigger than the rest. The crate tore sideways, smashing my arm against the piling. White-hot pain shot up to my neck. I screamed, but I didn't let go. Because when I looked back through the spray, Lennox was still there, still fighting, still looking at me like I was his last chance. And maybe I was. The tide roared again, louder, deeper. And I knew the next wave would be the one that decided everything. I let go of the pier. For 8 parts of my life that day, I clung to wood and rules and the thought that maybe I could do this without risking everything. But watching that German Shepherd puppy slam against the crate walls as the tide rose, I knew the truth. Lennox wasn't going to make it unless I went all in. The beam groaned again, splinters biting into my chest. Another surge rolled through, and the crate shifted lower, dragging him half under. His paws flailed against the slats, bubbles rising around his muzzle as he coughed and cried. That sound ripped straight through me. I sucked in a lungful of salt air, unwrapped the buoy rope from my wrist, and let myself drop. The water hit cold and hard, slamming me under before I could blink. Salt scorched my eyes, my ears roared, but I fought upward until I broke the surface beneath the pier, gasping. The crate was only feet away, wedged sideways, half submerged now. Lennox was pressed against the top, eyes wide, water lapping at his chin. His whimpering carried even over the thunder of waves. I kicked hard, wrapping an arm around the crate, the current trying to peel me off like I was nothing. "Easy, buddy, I'm here," I choked out, coughing on seawater. His nose pressed to the gap, licking at my cheek as if to say he believed me. That little lick lit a fire I didn't know I had left. I clawed for the latch, my fingers slipping again and again on the rusted metal. It was jammed tight with salt and sand, refusing to move. Another swell crashed, dragging us both lower, and I slammed my fist down on it once, twice, 3 times. My knuckles split, blood swirling red in the foam. On the 4th hit it gave, bending, cracking. I ripped at the lid, my muscles screaming, plastic groaning against its hinges. It wouldn't open fully, but it gave me just enough. I shoved my arm inside, scooping Lennox against my chest. He wriggled, coughing, his tiny claws digging into my vest, but he didn't fight me. He clung like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Above the pier, voices shouted, hands pointing, but down here it was just me and him, waves trying to tear us apart. I wrapped both arms around his trembling body, water rising higher, and I knew the crate was about to rip loose for good. And when it did, it would either crush us or free us. The crate exploded around us. One last wave slammed the piling, and the plastic finally surrendered with a sickening crack. The side panel snapped free, shards spinning in the surge. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over, that we'd both be dragged down with it. But instead, Lennox was suddenly in my arms, nothing between us now but the water and the fight to stay afloat. He coughed, sputtered, his tiny chest jerking against mine. I held him tight, one arm locked around his slick black fur, the other clawing at the current to keep us above the surface. The ocean didn't care. It roared and spun, dragging us toward the pier pilings, threatening to smash us against the barnacles. "Hold on, Lennox," I gasped, though I knew he couldn't understand the words. Still, he clung to me, his claws digging deep into my vest, his eyes wide but alive. Alive. That was all that mattered. I kicked hard, legs burning, aiming for the red buoy that still bobbed a few yards away. Each stroke felt like pushing against concrete, but slowly the distance shrank. Behind me, I heard splinters tearing, the pier still groaning, shedding wood into the water. The crowd screamed above, a chorus of panic and disbelief. The boy's voice rang clearest. "He's got the puppy! He's got him!" I gasped air, just enough to throw my weight forward, shoving us into the calmer pocket where the buoy drifted. I hooked it with my free arm and clung to it like a lifeline. Lennox's head rested against my chin, his breathing ragged, but his eyes locked on mine again. He blinked once, slow, like a promise. And then, as if the ocean knew it had lost, the tide shifted just enough to ease the pull. A pair of arms reached down from the pier, a dock hand, the same man who had tried to shove me back before. His face was pale now, eyes wide with something that looked like shame. "Give him to me," he shouted. But I shook my head, clutching Lennox tighter. "No, we're coming up together." I looped the rope around us both, knotting it one-handed, ignoring the sting in my bleeding palms. Above, hands gripped the line, heaving. The crowd leaned, shouting encouragement now instead of curses. For the first time since it began, I believed we might actually make it. But just as we rose toward the pier, Lennox stiffened in my arms. His body trembled violently, his chest heaving with shallow, broken breaths. And in that instant, I realized the battle wasn't over yet. He went limp against me. For one terrifying second, I thought I'd pulled Lennox from the ocean only to lose him in my arms. His little body sagged, water dripping from his nose, chest barely moving. No, stay with me," I begged, pressing him tighter against my vest as the dock crew hauled us up inch by inch. The crowd leaned over the rails, silent now, every face pale, waiting to see if this German Shepherd puppy would take another breath. My boots scraped wood, hands grabbed my shoulders, and then we were over the railing, sprawled flat on the hot boards of the pier. Salt water pooled around us, the air reeking of diesel and brine. I dropped to my knees, laying Lennox gently on the planks. His fur clung black and heavy, eyes half shut. I rubbed his chest hard, the way I'd once done during training drills with the Coast Guard when we practiced for dogs pulled from surf. "Come on, Lennox, fight!" My voice cracked. My hands shook so bad I almost missed my mark. Then, just as panic clawed at me, his tiny body convulsed. He coughed, once, twice, and then a gush of seawater spilled from his mouth. The pier erupted in gasps and cheers, but all I heard was the ragged, wheezy cry that followed. He was breathing, weak, uneven, but breathing. I bent down, forehead resting against his wet fur, whispering, "Good boy, you did it. You held on." The boy who had helped hold my legs earlier knelt beside me, tears streaming down his cheeks. He reached a shaky hand toward Lennox, who blinked slowly and, impossibly, leaned his nose forward to touch the boy's knuckles. That single gesture silenced the whole pier. Someone shoved a towel into my arms, white, sun-warmed, smelling faintly of sunscreen. I wrapped Lennox tight, cradling him like the most fragile thing in the world. He whimpered, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. The man who'd muttered, "Just a dog," earlier stood off to the side, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't bother with him. The puppy in my arms was proof enough of who had been right all along. As I looked at Lennox, bundled and trembling but alive, I felt it. Something shift in me. The same way the tide had turned, something inside me turned too. I'd gone under that pier thinking I was saving a dog, but now I knew he had saved me too. And that truth was only the beginning of where our story was headed. They left him to the tide, but he found a family instead. Lennox is safe now. That German Shepherd puppy who trembled in a sinking crate is in a foster home tonight, wrapped in blankets, his chest rising steady and strong. And me, Mateo Reyes, 41, just a volunteer who couldn't walk away, I'll never forget the way his eyes held mine when the waves tried to take him. That trust changed me. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Without them, Lennox wouldn't have the second chance he deserves. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: compassion saves lives. Someone chose cruelty when they locked him in that crate, but hundreds of strangers chose hope when they shared his story, donated, and helped him heal. Every view, every share spreads the word, and that ripple can reach the next puppy waiting for rescue. So if Lennox touched your heart, please share his story. It might be the reason another life is saved tomorrow. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.